When midnight fails, someone doesn't survive. Welcome to Clue Law. I'm your host, Vale. Drop your location in the comments. Your support matters. Straight in. If there's one thing you can say about Nero Wolfe, it's that time means something to him. When to rise, when to eat, when to sit, and most especially when not to be bothered. Which is why the trouble started at 11 minutes past 4 on a Tuesday, a time sacred to orchids and silence, and why I knew before the doorbell finished ringing that someone was about to regret their upbringing. The bell rang once. Then again, longer, like it was trying to make a point. I was at my desk, feet up, sorting a stack of clippings that Wolfe pretended not to care about, but always asked for within the hour. Fritz was upstairs in the plant rooms. Theodore Horstman was communing with chlorophyll. And Wolfe was where he always was, at that hour. Sunk into his chair like a Hindu idol of bulk and displeasure, eyes half-lidded, brain presumably galloping. He opened one eye. "Archie," he said, with a tone he used for words like boil or nuisance. "If that is not a catastrophe, you will ensure it becomes one for whoever is responsible." "Yes, sir," I said, already standing. "Any preferences? Verbal humiliation or permanent exile?" "Begin with courtesy," Wolfe said. "Escalate rapidly." I took the stairs 2 at a time and opened the front door on a man who looked like he'd been arguing with clocks his whole life, and losing. He was in his late 40s, lean in a way that suggested either discipline or anxiety, dressed too neatly for comfort. Gray suit, conservative tie, polished shoes. His hat was off, his hair carefully arranged, and his eyes had the look of someone who knew exactly what time it was and didn't trust it. "Good afternoon," he said. "Is Nero Wolfe in?" "That depends," I told him. "Are you here to sell him something, borrow money, confess a sin, or disrupt the natural order of the universe?" He blinked once. "I need to speak with him, privately." "Then you've come to the right address and the wrong hour." He hesitated, glanced past me into the hall, and then did something that got my attention. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's about o'clock," he said. That got him halfway inside before I realized it. I closed the door behind him and took his hat. "My name is Lionel Broom," he said. "I'm a horologist." "That's a fancy way of saying you're late for dinner," I said. "Follow me." Wolfe didn't look up when we entered the office, and he knew we were there. He always knew. The man had radar in his upholstery. "Mr. Wolfe," Broom said, stepping forward, "I appreciate your seeing me on such short notice." "You are mistaken," Wolfe said. "I do not appreciate it. State your business concisely." Broom swallowed. He glanced at me, then back at Wolfe. "I am the chief conservator for the Hargreave Clocktower." That did it. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. Now, the Hargreave Clocktower wasn't just a clock. It was a landmark, a civic monument, a vertical insult to gravity that had been telling New York the time since before Wolfe decided the city was tolerable. It rang on the hour, every hour, and had done so with the reliability of a German accountant. Until 3 nights ago. It missed midnight. Not by much. 2 minutes, maybe 3. But when you're dealing with a clock tower that's built its reputation on precision, 3 minutes might as well be a confession. "I fail to see how this concerns me," Wolfe said, though the words lacked conviction. Broom leaned forward, hands gripping the back of the red leather chair opposite Wolfe's desk like it might bolt. "Because it wasn't a malfunction, it was deliberate." Wolfe's fingers steepled. "Explain." "At precisely 11:57 p.m. on Sunday," Broom said, "the tower's main escapement was interfered with. Not damaged, adjusted, with expert care. The clock continued running, but the strike sequence was delayed. Only once. Then it returned to normal." "And this is a crime?" Wolfe asked. "It's a message," Broom said. That got a grunt. Wolfe leaned back, eyes narrowing. "Continue." Broom took a breath. "The Hargreave Trust is under review. There are disagreements over funding, over restoration priorities, over control. I've been pushing for a comprehensive overhaul. Expensive, yes, but necessary. Others disagree. Others with access, I said. Yes, Broom said. 5 people, including myself. And you come to me because, Wolfe said. Because whoever did this wanted me to notice, Broom said quietly. And because last night something of mine was taken. Wolfe's gaze flicked to him, sharp now. What? A notebook, Broom said. My personal restoration log. It contains measurements, tolerances, historical annotations, information that could be misused. It was in my study. The door was locked. There was no sign of forced entry. Silence settled in the room like dust. Wolfe studied Broom for a long moment. Then he said, You're asking me to identify a saboteur? Yes. And what? Wolfe asked. Do you propose as compensation? Broom straightened. The trust is prepared to offer a substantial fee. Wolfe waved a hand. Money is not the issue. Broom hesitated. Then he said, If this becomes public, the trust could fracture. The Clocktower might be shuttered for months. The city would lose a symbol. Wolfe's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Symbols, he said, are merely agreements sustained by habit. Still, habits have value. He looked at me. Archie? Yes, sir? Invite Mr. Broom to dine with us this evening. Broom's eyes widened. What? You will remain, Wolfe said. You will answer questions. You will not touch anything without permission, and you will not lie. Broom nodded, a little too quickly. And Archie, Wolfe added, settling deeper into his chair. Notify Mr. Panzer that his services may soon be required. I grinned. Clock's ticking. Wolfe closed his eyes again. Indeed, he said. And someone has presumed to decide when it should not. As I escorted Broom upstairs to the guest room, I had the uneasy feeling that the brownstone had just admitted a man carrying more than a missing notebook. The house felt different, like a watch that had been opened and not quite closed again. Midnight, I thought, had a way of leaving echoes when it didn't show up on time. Broom took the guest room like a man checking into custody, hatless, quiet, careful about where he put his hands. I left him with a few plain rules. Don't roam. Don't open doors that aren't yours. If you see Fritz, you don't ask for coffee unless you want your soul judged. And went back downstairs to find Wolfe still in his chair, still apparently half asleep, still running 3 chessboards at once in his head. He didn't open his eyes when I came in. You have observed him, Wolfe said. That's a polite word for it. He's wound tight enough to power the Hargreave for a month. Wolfe's eyelids lifted. Anxious men often speak truth inadvertently. Did he? Not yet. But he's carrying something besides that missing notebook. Pride, maybe, or fear, or both. Those twins usually show up together. Wolfe's gaze drifted to the clock above the mantel. That clock had no right to be as expensive as it looked, and it ticked with a sound I'd always found faintly insulting, like it was doing something essential while the rest of us merely breathed. Ah, Sunday, Wolfe murmured. At 11:57. Yep. A precise time. A precise act. Adjustment without damage. I can adjust things without damage, I offered. I can adjust a man's attitude with a look. Do not be puerile. I'll try to grow up before dinner. Wolfe's fingers moved, slow and deliberate, like he was turning a mental dial. There are 5 people with access, he said. Name them. I didn't ask. Wolfe stared at me. Okay, I said. I didn't ask yet. Ask now. So I did. I went upstairs, knocked once, because knocking twice around here is considered enthusiasm, and Broom opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been standing behind it. Yes? Names, I said. Wolfe wants the access list. He hesitated only a fraction, which told me he'd been expecting it. Of course. He cleared his throat. Myself. To naturally. Mara Hargreave. She's the trust chairwoman and the descendant. She has a key for ceremonial reasons, but she does go to the tower. Calvin Sloane, the trust treasurer. Dr. Edwin Varr, an architectural historian advising on preservation. And Daniel Klein, the city liaison for landmarks. 5, I said. Any assistants? Any maintenance guys with a key? Maintenance has keys to certain areas, but not the main mechanism room. That's restricted. The hatch is locked with a keyed cylinder. Only those 5 have it. Convenient, I said. And your notebook, tell me about it in a way that doesn't make me want to nap. It's not merely notes, he said. And there was the pride. It includes calibration marks for the escapement, wear patterns, hun and a list of parts to be replaced. That last part sounds like something a treasurer might enjoy reading. His jaw tightened. Yes. And you're pushing for a big overhaul, which means more money, which means more arguments. Yes. And someone adjusted the clock to miss midnight by a couple minutes just once to make sure you noticed. Yes. Message received. What did it say? Broom's eyes flicked away. It said, "Stop." I stared at him. Did it actually say stop, or are you translating from clock psychology? He didn't answer right away, and in that pause I saw a crack, something he didn't want to show. It said stop, he repeated, quieter. How? Note? Letter? Carved into the brass? He swallowed. A folded paper was tucked into the case near the pendulum housing. It wasn't there before. As it simply said, "Stop before midnight." No signature. All right, I said. Now we're talking. You didn't mention that downstairs. He glanced toward the stairs as if Wolfe might be listening through the wallpaper. I wasn't sure it mattered. Everything matters, I told him. With Wolfe, the list is short. Orchids, food, and whatever matters. You just got into the 3rd category, so try not to underreport. I went back down and delivered the names in the note. Wolfe absorbed them without visible reaction, which meant he was reacting like a volcano. Stop before midnight, he said softly. An admonition, also a jest. Or a threat, I said. Or a challenge, Wolfe corrected. Mr. Broom is vain, and he would not have come unless the provocation struck him. That's Wolfe for you. He could smell vanity like Fritz could smell a souffle that wasn't ready. Dinner arrived with its usual authority. Fritz served as if he were placing evidence on the table. Precise, calm, unhurried. Broom ate like a man who had not decided whether he was at a banquet or a tribunal. Wolfe ate like Wolfe, with focus, appreciation, and the faint look of someone who believed chewing was a human weakness but accepted it as necessary. Wolfe spoke only when he wanted an answer. The rest of the time he let the clink of silver and the ticking of the dining room clock do the work of pressurizing the room. "Mr. Broom," Wolfe said between courses, "describe the missing notebook's appearance." Broom set his fork down instantly. Black leather cover, sounds about 7 inches by 10. My initials embossed on the front, LB. It has a strap closure. And where did you keep it? In my study at home, in a desk drawer. The desk was locked. Who else lives there? My wife. No one else. Does your wife know the contents? She knows I keep notes. She doesn't read them. Wolfe's eyes remained on his plate. That is your belief. Broom's ears reddened. Yes. On Sunday night, Wolfe continued, when you found the paper message, what did you do? I examined the mechanism. I checked for damage. I verified the strike train. Then I reported the incident to the trust chairwoman. Mara Hargreave, Wolfe said, tasting the name like it might be a spice. Yes, she told me not to create panic. She said it could have been a fluke. And you accepted that? No, I knew it wasn't. Wolfe nodded slightly. When did you discover the notebook missing?" "Monday evening. I reached for it and it was gone." "Did you telephone any of the others?" "I called Mara. She said we would discuss it at the next meeting." Wolfe took a sip of beer. "How convenient." "For her. Now, your key. Where do you keep it?" Broom hesitated. "On my key ring." "Always?" "Yes." Wolfe's eyes lifted at last, and when Wolfe looks at you directly, you feel inspected like a questionable fish. "Mr. Broom, did you lend your key to anyone?" "No." "Did you ever leave it unattended?" "A few times," Broom admitted reluctantly. "At the trust offices. Briefly." Wolfe set his glass down. "Describe the trust offices." "2 rooms on the 4th floor of the Hargreave building. Reception and conference. A small records room." "Is there a safe?" "Yes." "Who has the combination?" Broom's face tightened again. "Mara and Calvin Sloane." There was our treasurer, waving his motive like a flag. Fritz cleared plates with the quiet efficiency of a man who had watched criminals melt under Wolfe's questions and considered it a form of domestic hygiene. When dessert came, something delicate and French, which in Fritz's hands means it might as well have been a peace treaty. Broom barely tasted it. After dinner, Wolfe returned to the office and dropped into his chair as if the chair were the only faithful object left in New York. I poured him beer, poured myself milk, don't ask, and sat down with my notebook. Wolfe held up a hand. "Before you begin your impertinent conjectures, Archie, we will hear a complete account from Mr. Broom. Again. In sequence, with no omissions." Broom came in looking resigned and slightly offended, which I liked. People who come into Wolfe's office expecting to control the conversation always look like that by the second hour. He started again. "Sunday night, the Tower. The delayed strike. The note, the call to Mara, the dismissal, the missing notebook the next evening." Wolfe asked small questions. What time he entered the Tower, who saw him, what doors were locked, how long he stayed, whether he touched the pendulum rod, where exactly the note was tucked. It was like watching someone take apart a pocket watch with a loop and tweezers, except the watch was a human story and the tweezers were Wolfe's patience. When Broom finished, Wolfe sat silent for so long I thought he might have dozed off, but I knew better. Silence in that room wasn't absence, because it was pressure building. Finally, Wolfe said, "Mr. Broom, you will remain available. Archie will begin tomorrow morning with Mr. Sloane." Broom blinked. "You think it was the treasurer?" "I think," Wolfe said, "that men who count money resent men who spend it, and that men who preserve history are easily provoked into foolishness. But I do not yet think anything definitive." Broom's shoulders loosened, just a little, then tightened again. "And the notebook?" Wolfe's mouth curved, not pleasantly. "It is not merely missing. It has been taken to be used. That is the disturbance. The clock missed midnight. Now the truth will, unless we prevent it." I shifted in my chair. "Any other instructions for your humble operative?" Wolfe looked at me. "Yes. In the morning you will visit the Hargreave Clocktower. You will not climb it, so of course. Thanks for the vote of confidence. You will observe the perimeter, the access points, the people. You will learn what you can without exertion. Exertion is vulgar." I grinned. Good thing I'm naturally lazy. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And Archie?" "Yeah?" "Do not allow anyone to enter this house tonight who is not already within it." I sat up. "You think someone's coming here?" Wolfe's voice was mild, which is how it sounds when he's most certain. The note said, "Stop before midnight. The next intrusion will not be directed at the clock. It will be directed at me." I didn't sleep much that night, which wasn't unusual when Wolfe made pronouncements about imminent intrusion. The brownstone has a way of amplifying expectation. Every tick of a clock sounds like a confession, every settling beam like a footstep reconsidered. and Broom stayed in his room. Fritz retired with the serenity of a man who trusted locks and his employer's temper. Wolfe, as far as I knew, slept like a satisfied Buddha, certain the universe would wait until morning to misbehave. It didn't entirely cooperate. At a little past 2, I was in my room pretending to read when I heard it. A soft sound, not quite a step, not quite the house clearing its throat. I froze, counted to 3, then eased the door open and listened. Silence. Then another sound. Metal, faint, somewhere near the front. I didn't call out. Wolfe had said not to allow anyone in. He hadn't said I couldn't escort someone out in pieces. I took the stairs slowly, shoes in hand, and reached the front hall just in time to see the shadow of a man through the frosted glass of the front door. He wasn't trying to force it, so he was working the lock with patience and familiarity, like someone who'd practiced on similar hardware. That decided me. I flipped on the hall light and opened the door. The man jerked back, hand snapping away from the lock. He was tall, spare, wearing a dark overcoat and a hat pulled low. For a split second, surprise crossed his face, then annoyance, which told me I wasn't dealing with an amateur. "Evening," I said pleasantly. "Or morning. Depends on your philosophy." He recovered fast. "I'm here to see Mr. Wolfe." "Unannounced," I said. "Uninvited. And with tools. That's a hard sell." He glanced past me, as if weighing his options. "My name is Daniel Klein. I represent the city." "That's nice," I said. "The city can wait until breakfast." He bristled. "This is important. So is not breaking into my house." Behind me, a light came on. At Wolfe's door, I guessed. He had timing like that. "Mr. Klein," I said, keeping my voice easy, "you can come back in the morning, ring the bell like a civilized menace, and we'll talk." "I don't have that luxury," he snapped. "That," I said, "is not my problem." I closed the door gently but firmly, engaging the deadbolt with a click that sounded final. Klein stood there a moment longer, then turned away, footsteps retreating down the stoop. I waited until the street was quiet again, then went back upstairs. Wolfe was awake when I entered the office, seated as always, robe immaculate, expression faintly annoyed, as if someone had misplaced a comma. "You received a visitor," he said. "Daniel Klein," I replied. "City liaison. He tried the lock." Wolfe's eyebrows rose a fraction. "At 2 in the morning. How energetic." He said it was important. Everything is important to those who arrive unbidden. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Did he succeed?" "No." "Good. Then he will return when it suits us." Wolfe looked at the clock. "Go back to bed, Archie. Tomorrow will be tedious." He was right about the tedious part. Morning came on schedule, which I appreciated. After breakfast, Wolfe satisfied, Fritz triumphant, I headed out to the Hargreave clock tower. The day was grey, the kind that made stone look older and secrets heavier. The tower rose above its block with institutional dignity, fenced, guarded, admired by tourists who trusted it to tell the truth. I didn't go inside. Wolfe had been clear. Instead, I walked the perimeter, watched the guards, noted the cameras, the service entrance around the back that smelled faintly of oil and pigeons. Not a man exited carrying a toolbox, nodded to me without interest. Another guard smoked by the fence, bored. I circled twice, then crossed the street and watched from a coffee shop window. That's where I saw Calvin Sloane. He came out of the Hargreave building next door, immaculate as ever, grey suit sharper than mine, briefcase clutched like a moral compass. He checked his watch, twice, then glanced toward the tower, lips pressed thin. I finished my coffee and followed him. Sloane walked with purpose, but not haste, the gait of a man who believed he was always late for something he didn't want to attend. He went 3 blocks, turned into a quiet side street, and entered a private office building. No sign, just glass and discretion. I waited, then followed. Inside, the directory listed accountants, consultants, and one firm of horological engineering and preservation. That caught my eye. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and stepped out into a hall that smelled like varnish and ambition. The office door was ajar. Voices inside, Sloane's and another, lower, unfamiliar. Not what we agreed, Sloane was saying. You agreed to results, the other voice replied. You got attention. I got panic, Sloane snapped, and now Wolfe is involved. That did it. I leaned against the wall, listening like a professional eavesdropper with a conscience on vacation. Wolfe? The other man said. You didn't mention him. I didn't expect Broom to run crying to a fat detective. Careful, the man said. You're the one who wanted leverage. I smiled. Leverage. That word gets used right before someone loses balance, and I backed away quietly and took the stairs down. Outside, I checked my notes and headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe listened without interruption as I reported. Klein's nocturnal visit, Sloane's meeting, the mention of leverage. When I finished, Wolfe nodded once. Mr. Sloane, he said, is counting minutes. That is always dangerous near clocks. Want me to talk to Klein? I asked. In due course. First, Mr. Sloane will be invited here. This afternoon. And if he declines, Wolfe's eyes gleamed. He will not. Sloane arrived at 4, punctual to the minute, carrying his briefcase like a shield. He was all courtesy and control, the kind of man who smiled with his mouth and calculated with his eyes. Wolfe greeted him without rising. Mr. Sloane, Wolfe said, you attempted to economize by intimidation. Sloane blinked. I beg your pardon. You arranged a symbolic disruption, Wolfe continued calmly. You sought to frighten Mr. Broom into abandoning his proposal. You underestimated his vanity. Sloane's smile stiffened. This is absurd. You also underestimated, Wolfe went on, the complexity of horology. Adjusting the escapement without leaving trace requires skill you do not possess. Therefore, you employed assistants. Sloane's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Wolfe's voice remained mild. The notebook was taken to supply that assistance with specifications. You intended to return it once your point was made. Silence stretched. I could hear the ticking of Wolfe's clock, each second stepping closer. And then, Wolfe said softly, Mr. Klein attempted to recover the notebook last night, fearing exposure. Sloane's eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. The shield slipped. You don't have proof, he said. Wolfe smiled, not pleasantly. Proof is a convenience. Control is sufficient. He leaned forward a fraction. This afternoon, Mr. Sloane, you will telephone the trust chairwoman and confess your actions. You will resign as treasurer, citing health. You will return the notebook to Mr. Broom. In exchange, I will not notify the district attorney of your conspiracy to interfere with a protected landmark. Sloane swallowed. And if I refuse? Wolfe's smile vanished. Then the clock will strike very loudly. Sloane sat very still for a long moment. Then he nodded. When he was gone, the brownstone seemed to exhale. Broom got his notebook back that evening, hands shaking as he checked it, relief softening his features. But the tower struck the hour on time. Midnight arrived without incident. Wolfe sat back in his chair, satisfied. Men, he said, should not attempt to stop time. It resents interference. I grinned. Dinner on schedule. Of course, Wolfe said. Justice, like appetite, is best served punctually. Wolfe's line about justice and appetite was still hanging in the air when Fritz announced dinner, and for an hour the world behaved itself in the only way Wolfe truly respected. Courses in order, sources in balance, conversation optional. Broom ate more than he had the night before, which meant his nerves had loosened just enough to permit digestion. He cradled the recovered notebook between bites like it might bolt. Wolfe watched him with that distant, heavy-lidded calm that can mean either contentment or calculation. And I'd seen Wolfe finish cases before with that same air, only to pull the rug a day later because something in the pattern still offended his sense of symmetry. After dessert, Broom excused himself early. He said he wanted to review his notes, which was like saying a man wants to review his lungs after being submerged. Wolfe and I went back to the office. Fritz cleared the table with the gentle competence of a man who never asked what crime had been committed so long as it didn't stain the linen. I sat at my desk and started typing up the day's results because when Wolfe is quiet, it's safer to occupy your hands. Wolfe opened his eyes. Archie. Yeah? You are complacent. That got me to stop. Excuse me. We have forced a confession from Mr. Sloane, Wolfe said. That does not mean we have arrived at the truth, as it means we have arrived at Mr. Sloane's capacity for fear. I leaned back. You think he didn't act alone? I think, Wolfe said, that he is not competent to conceive the phrase "stop before midnight" with adequate malice. That's picky. It is accurate. I was about to crack wise when the bell rang, not the front door bell, Fritz's signal from the kitchen, a little chime that meant either coffee or catastrophe. Fritz appeared in the doorway, his expression politely troubled. Mr. Wolfe, he said, Mr. Broom asks if he may speak to you. At once. Wolfe sighed as if the house had developed a leak. Bring him. Broom arrived clutching the notebook, but now he looked less relieved and more offended, which is often what happens when a man finds out he's been happy too soon. I'm sorry, he blurted, but there's something wrong. Wolfe didn't move. With what? With this, Broom said, and opened the notebook on Wolfe's desk with careful, almost reverent hands. It's intact. The strap, the cover, the pages, no obvious damage, but it's altered. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Show me. Broom flipped pages, fingers trembling slightly. Here, this section. My tolerance measurements for the escapement, and the part list for the proposed overhaul. He swallowed. And this page is missing. He turned the notebook so Wolfe could see the ragged edge where a page had been torn out. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction, just enough to confirm what he already believed. What was on the missing page? Wolfe asked. Broom hesitated, then said, a note about the original installation, a historical curiosity. I'd copied an entry from a journal, 19th century, about a modification made in 1891. What modification? Broom's face tightened. A concealed access panel inside the bell chamber, built for maintenance, but it's not on the official plans. That made my eyebrows go up. A secret compartment in a clock tower. That's practically begging for melodrama. Wolfe ignored me. Who else knew you possessed this information? No one, Broom said quickly, then corrected himself. No one recent. I mentioned it to Dr. Varr once, months ago. He's obsessed with the tower's history. He dismissed it as rumor. Wolfe's gaze became almost gentle, which is never reassuring. Mr. Broom, you are certain the page was present before the notebook was taken? Yes, Broom said. I'm certain. Then, Wolfe said, we have not recovered your notebook. As we have recovered what someone wished you to believe is your notebook. Broom went pale. But the rest, my handwriting, can be copied, Wolfe said, or photographed, or left undisturbed while a single page is removed. His voice hardened. Mr. Sloane returned what he took because he feared me. Whoever took that page does not fear me. I felt the brownstone's air change again. Subtly, like a clock shifting a tooth in its gear. Wolfe had been right about complacency. We'd been congratulating ourselves while someone else was still moving pieces. Wolfe turned his eyes to me. Archie. Dr. Var. Tomorrow morning. Got it, I said. And the city liaison? In due course, Wolfe repeated. First, we determine the relevance of the concealed panel. Broom licked his lips. Mr. Wolfe, why would someone want that page? Wolfe's voice was dry. Now it's because hidden spaces exist to hide things, and men hide what they do not wish found. Broom stared at the torn edge as if it had personally betrayed him. Wolfe inclined his head toward the guest room stairwell. You will retire now, Mr. Broom. You will not telephone anyone. You will not leave this house without my permission. Broom swallowed. Am I in danger? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You're in my house. That is the closest to safety you will find. Broom left, moving like a man who had just learned the floor might open. I was still staring at that notebook when Fritz came in with a tray. Beer, Mr. Wolfe, and milk, Mr. Goodwin. Thanks, Fritz, I said, because it's good to stay on the good side of the man who controls your meals. Fritz set the tray down but didn't leave right away, till he hesitated, rare for Fritz, and his gaze flicked toward the pantry door. Is something wrong? Wolfe asked. Fritz's mouth tightened slightly. Perhaps nothing, but I do not like it. That's Fritz for you. Polite, restrained, and when he says he doesn't like something, the sensible response is to start counting your fingers. What is it? Wolfe asked. Fritz gestured toward the pantry. The jar of allspice. It is not in its place. I blinked. Allspice. It is always, Fritz said patiently, in its place. Tonight it was moved to the second shelf behind the paprika. I did not move it. Theodore did not come down, and Mr. Broom has not been in the kitchen. Wolfe's eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, the calm had cooled into something harder. The brownstone, Wolfe said softly, has been entered. I felt my spine tighten. Front door was locked, windows too. Yes, Wolfe said, and yet the allspice has wandered. I got up fast and went to the hall, checking the front lock, the chain, the deadbolt. Secure. I checked the back door to the areaway. Secure. The windows latched. Nothing looked disturbed, which meant, of course, that something was. When I came back, Wolfe was staring at the clock on the mantel as if timing the house's heartbeat. There was a visitor last night, Wolfe murmured, and an intruder tonight. You think it's the same guy? I asked. No, Wolfe said. Mr. Klein is clumsy. This was subtle. Fritz stood quietly, offended on behalf of his spices. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, you will search, but discreetly. Do not rouse Mr. Broom, who do not disturb the house more than the intruder already has. And if I find something, you will bring it to me. I took a flashlight and started with the obvious, the office. Desk drawers, untouched. The safe behind the painting, still locked, dial marks aligned exactly as Wolfe left them. The rug, no grit that didn't belong. Then the hall closet, then the kitchen where Fritz hovered like a guardian angel with opinions. The pantry smelled like comfort and order. I found the allspice jar exactly where Fritz said it didn't belong, shoved behind paprika like it was hiding. I moved it, nothing behind it, but when I pulled the paprika forward, my fingers brushed something that didn't match glass or tin, a thin rectangle, stiff, tucked flat against the back wall. I slid it out, a folded piece of paper, creamy stock, no envelope, and I opened it under the flashlight. 2 words, printed in neat block letters, like someone who wanted no handwriting recognized. Before midnight. I didn't need Wolfe to translate that. It wasn't a note, it was a refrain. The kind you hear right before the chorus turns into a threat. I brought it into the office and set it on Wolfe's desk. Wolfe looked at it a long time, then said very quietly, "They are not warning Mr. Broom." I frowned. Then who? Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine, heavy and sure. Me. He picked up the paper delicately, as if it might be contaminated with stupidity. Then he placed it down again, precisely aligned with the edge of his blotter. "Archie," he said, "telephone Saul Panzer. Tell him to come at once." I reached for the phone. "And if Saul asks why?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Tell him," Wolfe said, "that someone has brought midnight into my pantry." Saul Panzer arrived the way he always did. Quietly, promptly, and with the air of a man who could find your childhood nickname in 10 minutes if he thought it would help. It was close to 10 when Fritz let him in, and I met him in the hall before he could take 2 steps into Wolfe's territory without clearance. "Saul," I said, "welcome to the house where the spices are restless." He gave me a flat look that meant he'd heard worse from better. "Wolfe in the office?" "Where else?" We went in. Wolfe didn't offer Saul a seat because Wolfe doesn't offer Saul anything except employment, and Saul doesn't expect charity. He stood near the red leather chair, hat in hand, eyes on Wolfe. Wolfe indicated the slip of paper on his desk. "Mr. Panzer, so that was placed in my pantry this evening." Saul's expression didn't change much, but his eyes sharpened. "How?" "That," Wolfe said, "is what I'm paying you to determine. Archie will tell you about Mr. Klein." I gave Saul the short version. 2 a.m., tools, impatience, city liaison, and my gentle encouragement to try legal daylight. Then I told him about Sloane's confession, the missing notebook page about the concealed access panel, and Fritz's allspice discovery. Saul listened without interrupting, as if filing each detail under a heading in his head. When I finished, Saul said, "You want to know who was in the house?" "Yes," Wolfe said. Saul nodded once. "I'll start with Klein." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "No, you will start with the concealed panel." Saul paused, surprised. "The tower?" Wolfe's voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "The tower is the origin. Someone used it to send a message. Someone stole information about a hidden access. Someone is now pressing that message into my pantry. There is a line. We will follow it." Saul inclined his head. "All right. I'll go to the tower in the morning." "You will also," Wolfe added, "learn everything about Dr. Edwin Varr, his finances, his habits, his access." Saul nodded again. "Anything else?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "Find out whether Calvin Sloane's confession was sincere." Saul's eyes flicked to me. "You got him to confess?" Wolfe's mouth tightened slightly. "Mr. Sloane confessed because he feared exposure of his meddling. Fear is a lever, not a guarantee." Saul left after that as smoothly as he'd come, and the brownstone settled into an uneasy quiet. I checked locks again, because that's what you do when a note shows up in your paprika like a bad joke. By morning, my nerves were damp and my patience was dry. Wolfe, of course, was pristine, as if anxiety was something that happened to other people's metabolism. At 9, the phone rang. It was Saul. "Heads up," Saul said. "Klein's office is in City Hall Annex. He's not there yet, but his assistant says he came in last night after midnight and pulled a file on the Hargreave Clocktower. Signed it out personally." "That's interesting," I said. "Any idea what file?" "Access records, maintenance permissions, incident reports." She didn't know specifics, but he was rattled. "Rattled," I repeated. "Good word," Saul continued. "Also, Dr. Varr has a lecture this afternoon at the Municipal Arts Society. Public. Topic: Hidden Mechanisms in Civic Monuments." I blinked. That's a little on the nose." "Exactly," Saul said. "I'm going to the tower now. Call you when I have something." I went into Wolfe's office and gave him Saul's report. Wolfe's eyes opened fully at the lecture title, and I could practically hear the gears catching. "Hidden mechanisms," Wolfe murmured. "How obliging." "You want me at the lecture?" I asked. "Yes," Wolfe said at once. "You will attend. You will observe Dr. Var. You will note who attends and who speaks to him. And Archie, do not attempt to be clever. Too late, I said. It's congenital. Wolfe ignored that. You will also visit Mr. Klein, not at City Hall, at his home, this evening. Home visit, I said. Old-fashioned. It will be informative, Wolfe said. A man who tries to pick my lock at 2 a.m. will not be comfortable under his own roof. So that afternoon I sat in a lecture hall full of people who wore scarves indoors and asked questions like they were laying traps. Dr. Edwin Var was on the stage, mid-50s, well-fed, neatly bearded, wearing glasses that suggested he enjoyed the sound of his own expertise. He spoke beautifully. He talked about gears and counterweights and the secret spaces built into old buildings for reasons ranging from maintenance to smuggling to ego. He showed slides of trapdoors, panels, hidden staircases. He spoke of the romance of concealment like it was a virtue. Then, 20 minutes in, he put up a photograph that made my scalp tighten. The Hargreave Clocktower bell chamber, close up. And there, highlighted with a tasteful red circle, there was a seam in the stonework I would never have noticed in 100 years, the concealed access panel. My mouth went a little dry. Var smiled at the audience. This, he said, is a detail not found on any official plan, and yet it exists. History, ladies and gentlemen, is full of unrecorded doors. Afterward, while the crowd drifted forward to ask questions and inhale his brilliance, I hung back and watched who went to him with purpose instead of admiration. 3 people did. One was a young woman with a sharp chin and sharper eyes. Mara Hargreave, if I guessed right. She didn't look like a descendant. She looked like a CEO who'd inherited a symbol and decided to run it like a company. The second was a compact man with a city badge clipped to his belt, Daniel Klein. The third was a tall man in a dark coat, hat pulled low, who didn't belong in the scarf crowd. He didn't speak much. He listened, nodded once, and slipped away before Var finished answering Mara's question. That third man was the one who made my instincts itch. I followed him out. He moved fast, weaving through pedestrians with the ease of someone who knew how not to be noticed. He turned a corner, crossed against the light, and headed toward the subway. I had about 10 seconds to decide whether to chase him or keep my eyes on the named players. I chose the named players. Wolfe didn't pay me to be athletic. He paid me to be accurate. I went back inside. Mara Hargreave was still at the front, voice low but firm. I drifted close enough to catch fragments. "Reckless," she was saying. "You can't present that publicly." Var smiled, bland. "It's scholarship. It's leverage," Mara snapped. Klein stepped in, palms out in the diplomat pose. "Miss Hargreave, it's already out. We need to manage the fallout." Mara's eyes flashed. "You need to manage your own people, Mr. Klein." That was a nice little bundle, descendant chairwoman, historian, city liaison, all arguing over a secret panel that had just been shown to a roomful of strangers. I waited until Mara walked away. Then I approached Var. "Dr. Var," I said, offering my hand. "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." That wiped the smile off him as neatly as a cloth. "Oh," he said. "Yes, I've heard of him." "I'll bet you have," I said. "Quick question. Where did you get that photograph of the panel?" His eyes flicked to the side. "From my archives." "Your archives," I repeated. "Meaning you've been in the bell chamber recently." "I have access," he said stiffly. "For research." "Sure," I said. "And did you also have access to Mr. Lionel Broom's notebook? The page you just presented happens to be missing from it." His face flushed. "That is an accusation." "It's an observation," I corrected. "Wolfe loves those." Var drew himself up. "I won't be interrogated in a public hall." "Then don't," I said pleasantly. Come to Wolfe's office tomorrow at 11. He hesitated, then said, I'll consider it. That's not a yes, I said. It's not a no, he snapped. Good enough for now. That evening I went to Daniel Klein's apartment on the east side. It was clean, modern, and expensive in the way city salaries aren't supposed to afford. He opened the door on the chain and stared at me like I was an overdue invoice. You, he said. Me, I agreed. Mind if we talk without the hardware? He didn't like it, but he unchained the door and let me in. Klein's living room had the sterile neatness of a man who didn't want objects to remember things. I sat without being asked. You broke into Wolfe's house last night, I said. His jaw tightened. I didn't break in. You tried. That's the same sin with less talent. He glared. You don't understand what's at stake. Try me. He hesitated, then said, Someone is using the tower, that hidden panel. People have died over things hidden in buildings. I leaned forward slightly. People have died. Recently? Klein's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to the window, the reflex of a man listening for footsteps that aren't there. I didn't say that, he muttered. But he had. And now, suddenly, missing midnight didn't feel like a prank or a threat. It felt like the first chime of something worse. But I left Klein's apartment with the taste of urgency in my mouth, and the strong suspicion that Wolfe's pantry note wasn't the crescendo. It was the warning bell. By the time morning came, the brownstone had the tense, scrubbed quiet of a place that knows something decisive is about to happen. Wolfe had sent the invitations himself, dictated, of course, summoning Mara Hargreave, Daniel Klein, Dr. Edwin Varr, and Lionel Broom to his office at 11 sharp. No explanations, no concessions, just the address and the hour. They arrived with varying degrees of confidence and resentment. Broom looked pale but steadied by the notebook he now kept tucked under his arm like a shield. Mara Hargreave entered as if she owned the room by inheritance, chin up, eyes alert. Klein came in guarded, the way a man does when he suspects the walls are listening. And Varr arrived last, urbane and irritated, carrying his intellect like a credential. Wolfe waited until they were seated, arranged by Fritz with polite firmness, before he spoke. Good morning, Wolfe said. You are here because the Hargreave Clocktower missed midnight, and because that failure has echoed. No one spoke. Wolfe let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable enough to be useful. The Clocktower, Wolfe continued, contains a concealed access panel in the bell chamber. This fact was known to Mr. Broom, recorded in his notebook, mentioned to Dr. Varr, and recently displayed publicly. The page recording this fact was removed from Mr. Broom's notebook while the remainder was returned to him, to allay suspicion. Varr stiffened. Mara's eyes narrowed. Klein swallowed. That panel, Wolfe went on, was not merely a curiosity. It was used. Broom leaned forward. Used? For what? Wolfe inclined his head. To store an object of value, an object small enough to be hidden, significant enough to provoke anxiety, and illegal enough to invite death. Klein's breath caught. That was all Wolfe needed. Mr. Klein, Wolfe said, you attempted to enter my house because you believed Mr. Broom's notebook, or what was taken from it, might be here. You knew something had been hidden in the tower. You feared exposure. Klein opened his mouth. Wolfe silenced him with a raised finger. Dr. Varr, Wolfe said, turning, you are an historian with debts. You have written well, lectured often, and lived beyond your means. You discovered the concealed panel months ago. With Mr. Broom's unwitting assistance, you learned its exact location. Yet you then used it to conceal an item you had agreed to move for a third party. Varr's face flushed. This is outrageous. It is precise, Wolfe replied. You removed the page from the notebook to protect yourself. You staged the lecture to create plausible deniability by making the panel public knowledge after the fact. Clever, but insufficient. Mara Hargreave rose halfway from her chair. You're saying he used my family's tower for smuggling? Yes, Wolfe said. And you, Miss Hargreave, suspected it. She froze. You dismissed Mr. Broom's alarm because you feared scandal, Wolfe continued. You hoped the disturbance would fade. When Mr. Sloane acted to intimidate Mr. Broom, you tolerated it until it grew dangerous. Mara sat slowly. What was hidden in the tower? Wolfe looked at me. That was my cue. An antique timepiece, I said. Not a clock, a chronometer, naval, 19th century, stolen from a private collection overseas, worth enough to ruin several careers. Var stared at me. You can't prove that. Saul Panzer can, Wolfe said calmly. He is at this moment speaking with officers downstairs. The chronometer was recovered last night from the concealed panel after Mr. Panzer followed a man who attended your lecture but did not applaud. Var slumped back, color draining from his face. The man you employed, Wolfe said, was careless. He left traces. He also left a note in my pantry. Wolfe held up the paper. Before midnight. It was not a threat, Wolfe said. It was an instruction. You believed time pressure would force my withdrawal. You misjudged me. Klein spoke then, voice strained. People have been hurt over that chronometer. Yes, Wolfe said. One man was killed attempting to retrieve it from another intermediary. You feared becoming the next. Klein looked down. I tried to stop it. By breaking into my house, Wolfe said. I'm not sympathetic. The room was very quiet. Wolfe folded his hands. Dr. Var, you will be arrested. Mr. Klein, you will cooperate fully and retain your position only if the city finds your contrition useful. Ms. Hargreave, the trust will survive because the truth will be managed, not concealed. Mr. Broom, he turned to Broom, who looked as if he'd aged a decade in an hour. You will restore the tower, Wolfe said, and you will understand that symbols endure only when men choose integrity over convenience. Broom nodded, eyes wet. Sirens sounded faintly outside. Saul Panzer appeared in the doorway, gave Wolfe a brief nod, and then stepped aside as uniformed officers entered to take Dr. Var away. Var did not protest. He looked relieved, which told me Wolfe had been right about fear being a lever. When they were gone, the brownstone seemed to breathe again. Mara Hargreave stood. Mr. Wolfe, she said quietly, the trust owes you. Wolfe waved a hand. Your gratitude is unnecessary. Your discretion is sufficient. She nodded and left with Klein, who did not look back. Broom lingered. Thank you, he said simply. Wolfe regarded him. Time, he said, is merciless to those who misuse it. Remember that. Broom did, and left. Dinner that night was impeccable. Fritz outdid himself, perhaps offended on behalf of the pantry. Wolfe ate with visible satisfaction, the kind that comes from both justice and proper seasoning. As I poured his coffee, I said, So the clock missed midnight to signal a hidden crime. Yes, Wolfe said. And because someone wished to hurry me. I smiled. Did they? Wolfe looked at the clock on the mantel, ticking steadily, obedient now. No, he said. Midnight arrives when it chooses. Men merely pretend to manage it. I leaned back, listening to the tick, thinking about hidden panels and missing pages and how close the house had come to being just another place something went wrong. Well, I said, at least the allspice is back where it belongs. Wolfe closed his eyes. Order, he murmured, is a comfort, especially when time behaves. The clock struck the hour, on time, loud and clear. I decided to trust it again,